I thought I returned to Briar Glen just to bury my father, but I walked straight into a negotiation. Standing by the open grave, my brother Evan didn't look at the casket. He looked at me like I was a guest he needed to evict. Before the dirt hit the wood, he announced he was selling our family home this week. I realized then that I wasn't there to mourn. I was there to stop a liquidation. The drive from Harbor Point, Maryland, to Briar Glen, Pennsylvania, usually took 3 hours, but today it felt like I was driving backward through time. My Subaru was packed with a week of business casual clothes, a laptop I intended to ignore, and a low-grade nausea that had nothing to do with the winding roads. I was 33 years old. I worked in compliance for a regional insurer. I spent my days auditing claims, checking boxes, and ensuring that reality matched the paperwork. I liked the rules. Rules meant safety. But as the familiar, rusting sign of Briar Glen came into view, the rules dissolved. I was coming home to bury my father. The sky was a bruised purple, threatening rain that refused to fall. I parked in the gravel lot of the funeral home, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but my makeup was fixed. I looked professional. I looked like Sarah Coleman, the woman who had escaped this suffocating valley to build a life of order near the coast. But inside, I felt like the little girl who used to hide under the dining room table while my brother Evan and my father argued about things I did not understand. I walked into the reception hall expecting the heavy, suffocating blanket of grief. I expected whispers of, "I am so sorry," and "He was a good man," instead. The air in the room felt sharp, charged with an energy that belonged in a boardroom, not a wake. People were eating ham biscuits and potato salad, but their eyes were darting around. In the center of the room stood my brother, Evan. He was 38 now, wearing a suit that looked expensive but fit him poorly, tied across the shoulders as if he were carrying a physical weight. He was not crying. He was shaking hands. He was nodding vigorously. He looked like a man running for office, not a son mourning his last parent. I made my way to him. He saw me, and for a second, his face flickered. I saw the older brother who used to teach me how to skip stones at the creek. Then the mask slammed back down. "Sarah," he said. His voice was too loud. "You made it. Traffic was bad." I said. I reached out to hug him, but he patted my shoulder stiffly, keeping a strange distance between us. "I am glad you are here," he said, turning back to the room before I could even respond. "We have a lot to get through." We moved to the graveside service an hour later. The wind had picked up, biting through my black coat. The priest spoke about peace and rest, words that felt hollow against the tension radiating off my brother. Evan stood next to me, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He kept checking his watch when the service ended and the crowd began to thin. Evan turned to me. He did not ask how I was. He did not ask if I needed a moment with the casket. "We are selling the house," he said. I blinked. Sure, I had misheard him over the wind. "What did you say?" "The house on Marrow Lane," he said. He looked at the grave, then back at me, his eyes hard and unblinking. "I am listing it this week. Dad left us with nothing but bills. Sarah, the maintenance alone is drowning us. I am handling it." He said the word handling like it was a weapon. "Evan, we have not even lowered him into the ground yet." I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of shock and rising anger. "We cannot talk about selling the house right now. That house has been in our family for 3 generations. We do not have a choice," he snapped. The tone was familiar. It was the voice he used when we were teenagers. The voice that said, "I am the man of the house," even when Dad was sitting right there. He looked at me, and I felt the cold realization wash over me. He did not see me as a partner in this grief. He saw me as a guest. He saw me as an obstacle. I watched him. He was sweating despite the cold. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "You have no idea how bad it is," he said, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You have been away in Maryland, living your perfect little life. You do not know what it has been like here." "Then tell me," I said. "Show me the bills. I work in compliance." "Evan, I deal with documentation for a living. Let me help you go through the estate. No, he said too quickly. I told you. I am handling it. He walked away toward the line of cars, leaving me standing alone by the open earth. The old pattern clicked into place like a heavy lock. Evan took charge, made a mess, and demanded silence. Sarah swallowed her questions to keep the peace, but the peace was already dead. I walked back to the reception area to collect my purse, my mind racing. Selling the house this week? It was impossible. Probate took months. You could not just sell a house like you were selling a used car on the side of the road. Ms. Coleman? I turned. A woman stood there, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee. She was beautiful in a sharp, manufactured way. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and her suit was tailored to within an inch of its life. She did not look like anyone from Briar Glen. I am Sarah, I said. Dina Kessler. She said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, cool, and dry. I am with North Pine Property Solutions. I just wanted to offer my condolences. Your father was a fixture in this town. Thank you, I said, pulling my hand away. Did you know him? Briefly, she said. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were assessing me, calculating my value in an equation I did not understand. I have been speaking with your brother. I know this is a difficult time, but I wanted to assure you that North Pine specializes in seamless transitions. We can close fast. We make things very easy for families in transition. Close fast. The words hung in the air. She was not here to mourn. She was here to close. You have already discussed a sale with Evan? I asked. We have had preliminary chats, she said smoothly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a card. It was black with silver lettering. Heavy stock. Call me if you have any questions. Sarah. We can have cash in the estate account by Friday. She walked away before I could respond. Cash by Friday. That was not a real estate transaction. That was a liquidation. I drove to the house on Marrow Lane with a pit in my stomach. The house sat on a hill overlooking the town, a sprawling Victorian that had once been white but was now a peeling, weary gray. It looked like a tired old man sitting on a porch, waiting for the end. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The smell hit me instantly. Old paper, cedar dust, and the faint, lingering scent of my father's tobacco. It smelled like safety. It smelled like home. But as I walked through the hallway, the house felt wrong. It felt stripped. My father had been a man of clutter. He saved newspapers, receipts, magazines, and letters. He believed that every scrap of paper held a potential truth he might need later. But the living room was tidy. The stacks of National Geographic were gone. The mantel was clear of the jagged little rocks he used to collect. I walked into his den, the heart of the house. This was where he spent his evenings, sitting in his leather chair, reading legal thrillers and listening to the radio. The den was bare. The shelves were empty. The desk surface, usually a landslide of invoices and notes, was polished wood. It looked like a hotel room. Someone had been here. Someone had pre-sorted his life before he was even cold. Evan. I sat down in his leather chair. It creaked, a familiar sound that made my throat tight. I opened the center drawer of the desk. It was empty, save for a single paperclip and a folded funeral program from a service 3 years ago. Mrs. Gable. A neighbor. I picked up the program, wondering why Dad had kept it in the center drawer. As I turned it over, a yellow sticky note fluttered to the desk surface. I picked it up. The handwriting was shaky, the script of a man whose hands had started to fail him, but I recognized the loop of the L and the sharp cross of the T. Don't trust the fast money. Ask L. Harlan. I stared at the note. Fast money. Dina Kessler's voice echoed in my head. We can close fast. My father knew. He knew something was coming. I checked the time. It was 3 p.m. If I hurried, I could make it to town before the offices closed. Kite Harlan Law Group was located in a brick building on Main Street. Sandwiched between a bakery and a hardware store, the waiting room smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I told the receptionist who I was. And 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from Lydia Harlan. Lydia was a woman who seemed carved out of oak. She was in her 60s, with short gray hair and glasses that magnified her sharp, intelligent eyes. She did not offer me tea. She did not offer me platitudes. She sat with a file open in front of her, her hands clasped on top of it. "I am sorry about your father, Sarah," she said. Her voice was gravelly and low. "He was a stubborn man. I liked him. Thank you," I said. "I found a note. Lydia. He told me to ask you." Lydia nodded slowly. She opened the file. "I expected you might come. Evan has been calling my office 3 times a day for the past week, asking about the will. He wants to sell the house," I said. "He says there are debts." "There are always debts," Lydia said. "But the house is not the immediate issue. The issue is the insurance." "Insurance?" I asked. "Your father had a small life insurance policy." Lydia said, $25,000. Not a fortune, but enough to cover the funeral and taxes, with a little left over." "Okay," I said. "That should help Evan with the bills." Lydia looked at me over the rim of her glasses. 2 weeks ago, your father came in here. He looked terrible. He could barely walk, but he insisted on signing a change of beneficiary form. He removed the estate as the beneficiary." She slid a piece of paper across the desk. "He named you. Sarah, you are the sole beneficiary." I stared at the document. My name was typed in the center of the page. Sarah Marie Coleman, 100%. "Why would he do that?" I asked. "If the estate is in debt, why keep the money out of it?" "Because creditors can claim against an estate," Lydia said, "but they cannot claim against a named beneficiary. That money is yours. Sarah, it does not go to the bank, it does not go to the credit card companies, and it does not go to Evan." I felt a chill run down my spine. Dad was protecting the money. He was hiding it from someone. "Does Evan know?" I asked. "Not yet," Lydia said, "but he will find out soon enough." I left the law office with the copy of the beneficiary form folded in my purse. The town of Briar Glen looked different now. The shadows stretched longer across the street. The faces of the people walking by seemed harder, more secretive. When I pulled into the driveway on Marrow Lane, Evan's truck was parked crookedly on the grass. The front door was open. I walked in. Evan was in the kitchen, pacing. He had a beer in his hand, and his tie was undone. He looked up when I entered, his eyes wild. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I went to see Lydia Harlan." I said. I kept my voice calm. The compliance officer voice. Evan froze. He set the beer down on the counter with a clatter. "You went to the lawyer?" "Why?" "I told you I'm handling it. I found a note from Dad. Evan, he told me to talk to her." Evan's face went pale, then flushed a deep, angry red. He walked toward me, entering my personal space. "What did she say?" "She told me about the insurance policy." I said. Evan let out a short, sharp laugh. Good. That is $25,000. I can use that. That will stop the bleeding for a few days. We can pay the funeral home and give the rest to the creditors. He cannot use it." I thought, "Evan," I said softly. "Dad changed the beneficiary. He stopped moving." "What?" "He changed it 2 weeks ago." I said. "He left the policy to me, directly. It is not part of the estate." For a moment, there was silence in the kitchen. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the thumping of my own heart. Then Evan exploded. He slammed his hand against the counter. "You are lying," he screamed. "He would not do that. We are partners in this. It is the truth," I said, taking a step back. "You stole it," he shouted, pointing a finger at my face. "You came back here with your fancy job and your arrogance, and you manipulated him. You stole my inheritance. I did not even know about it until an hour ago," I yelled back, my patience snapping. Evan stared at me, his chest heaving. Then, just as quickly as the anger had come, it vanished. He collapsed against the counter, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. He put his head in his hands. "Sarah, please," he whispered. I looked down at him, my big brother. the one who was supposed to be the strong one. He looked broken. "I need that money," he said. His voice was thick with tears. "You do not understand. I need it." "For what?" I asked. "Is it the house bills?" He did not answer. He just rocked back and forth slightly. "Just loan it to me," he begged. He looked up at me, and the shame in his eyes was unbearable. "Just a loan. I will pay you back when the house sells. I promise. Please, Sarah. If I do not come up with something, I am in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I asked. Kneeling beside him, "Evan, talk to me. Who do you owe?" He shook his head violently. "I cannot say. Just give me the money. Please, I cannot give you money I do not have yet," I said gently. "It takes time to process a claim." He flinched. "Time. I do not have time." He stood up abruptly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. He looked at me with a strange mixture of hatred and fear. "Keep your money," he spat. "I will fix this myself. I always do." He stormed out of the kitchen and up the stairs. I heard his bedroom door slam shut. I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the silence of the house. It did not feel like a home anymore. It felt like a trap. I made myself a sandwich that I could not eat. I sat in the living room as the sun went down, watching the shadows lengthen across the floor. I tried to read a book, but the words swam on the page. Around midnight, I went out to the front porch to get some air. The rain had finally started. A slow, steady drizzle that hissed on the asphalt. The air was cold and clean. I was about to go back inside when I heard a voice. It was a whisper, urgent and terrified. It was coming from the side of the porch, around the corner where the swing sat. I froze. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath. "No. Listen to me," Evan whispered. I heard him pacing, the scuff of his shoes on the wood. "I know what I said, but the funeral was today. I need a few more days." There was a pause. He was listening to someone on the other end of the phone. "I am trying," Evan hissed. His voice cracked. "She is asking questions. My sister. She is not like me. She reads the paperwork." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was talking about me. "I can't stall anymore," he whispered. I know the deadline." Another pause, long and heavy. "Please don't," Evan said. His voice was so quiet I could barely hear it. "They'll come to the house?" "No, do not come to the house. I will get the signature. I swear. Just do not come here." The line went dead. I heard the click of his phone. I waited until I heard the screen door open and close, until I heard his heavy footsteps go back up the stairs. Only then did I let out the breath I had been holding. "They'll come to the house." It landed in my stomach like a stone. This was not just about gambling debts or unpaid utility bills. This was physical. This was dangerous. Evan had brought something dark to our doorstep. I went back inside and locked the door. I checked the deadbolt twice. I climbed the stairs to my childhood room. It was exactly as I had left it 15 years ago. The walls were a pale yellow. The posters of bands I no longer listened to were still taped up. My high school trophies were gathering dust on the dresser. I changed into my pajamas and crawled into the narrow twin bed. I stared at the wall opposite me. Something was different. I sat up and squinted in the gloom. The wall above the dresser. There was a faint rectangle of cleaner paint, a ghost outline where a picture frame used to hang. I remembered that frame. It had held a copy of the original deed to the land, a piece of parchment Dad was proud of. He loved the history of this place. Why was it gone? I got out of bed and walked to the dresser. I looked around the room. Had Evan sold the antiques? Was he selling the furniture too? I pulled the dresser away from the wall slightly. Something fell to the floor with a soft thud. It was a piece of paper, folded into a tight square. I picked it up and unfolded it. It was a copy of a property survey. It looked old. A photocopy of a photocopy. It showed the property lines of our house on Marrow Lane. There was a large circle drawn in red ink around the back acreage, the wooded part of the lot that sloped down toward the creek. Next to the circle, in my father's handwriting, firm, clear, From before the sickness took his steady hand, were written words that made no sense to me. Easement. Don't let them split it. I stared at the map. An easement? We owned the land. Why would there be an easement? And who was trying to split it? I looked at the ghost on the wall, then back at the map. Dad had hidden this. He had taken down the deed and hidden this map behind my dresser, in the one room he knew Evan rarely entered. He was leaving me breadcrumbs. I lay back down in bed, clutching the paper to my chest. The wind howled outside, rattling the old window panes. I thought about Evan's terrified whisper on the porch. I thought about Dina Kessler's shark-like smile. I thought about the bare den. I closed my eyes, but I knew I would not sleep. The funeral was over, but the war had just begun, and for the first time in my life, I was not going to follow the rules. I was going to find out what my brother was hiding, even if I had to tear this house apart to do it. The morning sun did not break through the clouds. It merely turned the gray sky a lighter shade of slate. I sat across from Lydia Harlan again, watching a dust mote float in the stagnant air of her office. The clock on the wall ticked with a rhythmic, heavy sound that felt like a judge's gavel hitting a block over and over. Probate is a process of discovery. Sarah, Lydia said. She was not looking at me. She was looking at a document in front of her, her finger tracing a line of text. And sometimes, we discover things we wish had stayed buried. I leaned forward. The leather chair creaked. What is it? Is it about the insurance? No, she said. The insurance is clear. That is yours. This is about the house. She turned the document around and slid it across the mahogany desk. It was a title search result, a dense block of legalese that I dealt with every day in my job. But I wasn't looking for compliance codes. I was looking for the bold headers. There, halfway down the page, was a recording. Lien holder, Morrowland Finance. Date, September 14th, 2025. Amount, $68,000. I stared at the numbers. $68,000. That was nearly half of what the house was worth in this market. I have never heard of Morrowland Finance, I said, my voice sounding thin in the quiet room. And I never heard Dad mention a loan. He paid off the mortgage 10 years ago. We had a party. He burned the note in the fireplace. Lydia nodded. He did. This is a new recording. It was filed 4 months ago. 4 months ago? That was right when Dad's health started to take a sharp turn downward, when the confusion started setting in. I drove home with the document on the passenger seat, driving too fast on the slick roads. The house waited for me on the hill, silent and accusatory. Evan was in the living room, boxing up books. He looked up when I stormed in, holding a stack of old encyclopedias. What is this? I asked, slamming the paper down on the coffee table. Evan glanced at it, and for a split second, his eyes went wide. Then, the mask slid back into place. He sighed, putting the books down. I told you there were bills. Sarah, this is not a bill. I said, this is a lien. $68,000. Evan, why did Dad take out a loan against the house 4 months ago? Evan rubbed the back of his neck. He looked tired. The dark circles under his eyes were like bruises. It was the medical costs. He said quietly. I froze. What? His insurance coverage capped out. Evan said. He walked over to the window and looked out at the rain. The experimental treatments, the home care, it all added up. Sarah. He didn't want to tell you. He didn't want you to worry or try to pay for it yourself. So he borrowed against the equity. I felt the anger drain out of me, replaced by a heavy, aching guilt. I had been in Maryland, auditing spreadsheets, while my father was mortgaging his legacy to stay alive. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. He made me promise, Evan said. He turned to me, his face open and earnest. He said, do not burden Sarah. She has her own life. I sank onto the sofa. I felt small. I felt selfish. I had come here ready to fight, ready to accuse, and all along, Evan had been carrying the weight of our father's dying wish. I am sorry. I whispered. Evan nodded. He came over and squeezed my shoulder. It is okay. That is why we have to sell. Sarah, to pay off Morrowland, to clear the debt. It is what he wanted. I believed him. For 3 hours, I believed him. I went to the kitchen and started cleaning, trying to make myself useful, trying to wash away the guilt with dish soap and bleach. Then my phone buzzed. It was Lydia Harlan. Sarah, she said. Her voice was clipped. Hi, Lydia. I said, I talked to Evan. He explained it. It was for medical bills. Dad's insurance capped out. There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. Sarah, Lydia said, I just got the wire details from the bank. I wanted to verify the disbursement. Okay, I said. A cold prickle starting at the base of my neck. The $68,000 was not paid to a hospital. She said, it was not paid to a pharmacy or a care facility. Where did it go? I asked. It was wired to an LLC called Blue Chip Holdings. Lydia said, and Sarah? The wire was authorized by a digital signature. I gripped the phone tight. I checked your father's medical records. She continued, his insurance covered everything. There was no cap. The phone felt heavy in my hand. The kitchen, which moments ago had felt like a place of penance, now felt like a crime scene. Thank you. Lydia, I said. I hung up. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I went to the sink and turned off the water. Evan was lying. He wasn't just hiding something. He was using our father's death as a shield. I needed proof. I needed to follow the money. I grabbed my coat and drove to Briar Glen Community Bank. The lobby was quiet, smelling of floor wax and old money. I asked to see the transaction records for the months leading up to Dad's death. Because I was the executor named in the will, something Evan still hadn't contested properly yet, they let me into a small glass-walled room. I was staring at a screen full of numbers when the door opened. Sarah Coleman? I looked up. A man stood there. He was wearing a gray suit that fit him well. Though his tie was loosened, he had dark hair that was starting to gray at the temples, and eyes that were serious and sharp. Jonah Pike. We had gone to high school together. He had been the quiet kid in the back of a P history, the one who always had the right answer but never raised his hand. Jonah, I said, I haven't seen you in 15 years, he said. He didn't smile. He didn't do the small-town pleasantries. He looked at the file on the desk. You are looking at the Morrowland transaction. News travels fast. I said, I work in risk auditing now. Jonah said. He closed the door behind him and sat in the chair opposite me. I saw the flag on the account. Flag? I asked. Morrowland Finance isn't a normal lender. Sarah, he said. He lowered his voice. They operate in the gray zones. High interest, short-term, collateral-heavy loans. They target people who can't go to a traditional bank. Like my father? I asked defensively. My father had excellent credit. Jonah looked at me, and I saw pity in his eyes. I hated it. Did your dad ever mention Red Alder Lodge? He asked. No, I said. Is that a nursing home? Jonah hesitated. No, it is a private club, out on County Road 9. It operates under a social club license. But, well, a lot of money moves through there. Red Alder Lodge. The name meant nothing to me. Why are you asking me this? I asked. Because Morrowland Finance often holds paper for debts incurred at places like Red Alder, Jonah said. He leaned in closer. Sarah, be careful. If that lien is real, they can foreclose fast. They don't want the money. They want the asset. I drove back to the house, my mind racing. Red Alder Lodge, a private club. I thought about Evan. I thought about the nights he had been disappearing. He would take his old gym duffel bag, the green canvas one he had since college, and say he was going to clear his head or meet some friends. He always came back late, smelling of smoke and nervous sweat. I parked the car and walked into the house. It was quiet. Evan wasn't in the living room. I found him in the kitchen, eating a bowl of cereal like a teenager. He looked up, and for a second, he looked relieved to see me. Then he saw my face. We need to talk. I said. I sat down at the sticky pine table. I put my hands flat on the wood. Lydia called. I said, the money didn't go to a hospital. It went to a shell company. Evan stopped chewing. He put the spoon down, and I just came from the bank. I continued. I ran into Jonah Pike. He asked me if Dad knew about Red Alder Lodge. The color drained from Evan's face so fast it was frightening. He looked like he was going to be sick. Evan, I said, keeping my voice steady, did you forge Dad's signature? He looked down at his hands. They were trembling. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he whispered. Did you forge it? He nodded. A tiny jerky motion. Why? I asked. Why, Evan? I owed them, he said. His voice cracked. I was going to pay it back. I swear. Sarah, I had a system. I was up, and then I was down. And then they said I had to pay. They said I had a week. Gambling. I said, the word tasted like ash. You gambled away Dad's equity? I was trying to win it back, he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. You don't understand. After Mom died, the house was so quiet. Dad was so sad. I just wanted to feel something else. And then it got out of control. How much do you owe? I asked. Evan didn't answer. Evan, I said, how much? The $68,000 covered the first marker. He said, but there is more. How much more? He looked at me, his eyes wet with tears. 40 more. $108,000. I closed my eyes. I felt a wave of dizziness. You have to sell the house. I said, that is why you are pushing so hard. They are going to hurt me. Sarah, he whispered, you don't understand who it is. These aren't bank tellers. These are bad people. If I don't pay them... Who? I asked. Who runs Red Alder? He shook his head frantically. I can't say. I can't. We sat in silence for a long time. The rain drummed against the window. Then I saw it. On the counter, near the fruit bowl, was a set of keys. They weren't mine. They weren't Evan's. They had a bright yellow tag on them. I reached out and picked them up. The tag read, North Pine, valuation. What is this? I asked. Evan flinched. Dina needed a set to show the contractors for the valuation. You gave her keys? I asked. When? Yesterday, he mumbled. Yesterday, before the funeral. Before he had even told me they were selling. She has been in the house? I asked, just to look around. Evan said, to measure. I felt a violation so deep it made my skin crawl. Dina Kessler, that shark in the suit, had been walking through our home while we were burying our father. She had keys. She could come in whenever she wanted. Evan, I said, standing up, you didn't just decide to sell. You are already in the process. You are practically an escrow. I had to, he cried. They are charging interest every day. I walked out of the kitchen. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't look at the brother who had taught me to ride a bike, who was now selling our history to save his own skin. I went into the den. I needed to think. I needed to be where Dad was. The den was still bare, still stripped of its personality. I walked over to the bookshelf. Most of the books were gone, packed into boxes by Evan, but a few remained. Dad's favorites, the ones he read over and over. I pulled down a copy of Black's Law Dictionary, an ancient, crumbling edition he had bought at a garage sale just because he liked the look of it. It felt light, too light. I frowned. I opened the cover. The pages had been cut out. It was a hollow book. Inside the hollowed-out center lay a white envelope. My heart hammered in my throat. I picked it up. On the front, in that shaky, familiar handwriting, was written, Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I sat down on the floor, my back against the desk. My hands were shaking as I tore open the flap. The letter was written on legal pad paper. Sarah, I am sorry to leave you with a mess. I tried to clean it up, but time ran out, and my mind isn't what it used to be. I know about Evan. I know about the trouble. He thinks he is hiding it, but I see the fear in him. I tried to protect the house. There are things about this land that even you don't know. Things I promised to keep safe. I am sorry for making you the strong one. It is a heavy thing to carry. Being the one who has to fix everything. I should have protected you better. I should have protected him better. If things get bad, and they will, Find Mara Vance. She knows the history. Love, Dad, Mara Vance. I stared at the name. I had never heard it before. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I stood up. I felt a sudden surge of clarity. Dad hadn't just been a victim of Evan's schemes. He had been fighting back, in his own quiet way. I went back to the kitchen. Evan was gone. The back door was open, swinging in the wind. I drove to Lydia's office. It was late, almost closing time. She looked surprised to see me again. I found a letter. I said, placing it on her desk. She read it. Her face remained impassive, but when she reached the end, her eyes stopped moving. She went very still. Mara Vance. She said softly, "Who is she?" I asked. Lydia took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "That name is part of an old local dispute. A very old one. I haven't heard that name spoken in Briar Glen in 20 years. Is she alive?" "I believe so," Lydia said. "She lives out in Hollow Creek now. She used to work for the county surveyor's office. Why would Dad tell me to find a surveyor?" "Because," Lydia said, putting her glasses back on, "land is the only thing that matters in this town, Sarah. And surveyors know where the bodies are buried, figuratively speaking." I left Lydia's office with a new destination, but the courthouse was closer. I needed to see what else Dad had been doing. The Briar Glen Records office was in the basement of the town hall. It smelled of mildew and old paper. The clerk, a bored teenager with purple hair, pointed me to the terminals. I searched our address, Marrow Lane. The screen filled with the usual history: the deed transfer to Dad in 1990, the mortgage release, the Morrowland lien. But there was something else. A drafted document, dated 3 years ago. Conservation restriction. Draft. Status. Unexecuted. I opened the file. It was a legal document limiting the development of the property. It explicitly forbade subdividing the land or building commercial structures on the back acreage. Dad had tried to lock the land down. He had tried to make it worthless to developers, but he hadn't signed it, or he hadn't finished it. Why? I printed the document. As I walked out of the town hall, night had fully fallen. The streetlights hissed in the rain. I was hungry, a gnawing, empty feeling that had nothing to do with food. I stopped at the Double R Diner on the edge of town. It was a place of chrome and red vinyl, a relic that refused to die. I walked in and scanned the room for a booth. Then I stopped. In the back corner, sitting in a booth with a clear view of the door, was Dina Kessler. She wasn't wearing her blazer now. She looked relaxed, dangerous. She wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man. He was large, with a thick neck and a buzz cut. He was wearing a dark jacket with a logo embroidered on the chest in gold thread. Ridgewell Development. I felt a cold snap of recognition. Ridgewell was the massive developer that had been buying up farmland on the other side of the county, turning pastures into luxury condos. Dina was leaning in, talking intensely. The man was nodding, cutting a steak with methodical precision. Then Dina looked up, her eyes locked with mine. For a second, her expression was blank. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It wasn't the shark smile from the funeral. It was something worse. It was a knowing smile. She raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. The man turned to look at me. His face was flat, unreadable. Dina's eyes bored into me. They said, "Clear as day. Stop digging." I turned around and walked out. I got into my car and locked the doors. Evan was selling the house to pay a gambling debt. But North Pine wasn't just a flipper. They were working with Ridgewell. And Dad had tried to block development years ago. This wasn't just about a sad old man and his gambling son. This was a land grab, and my brother had opened the door and invited them in. The next morning, the air in Lydia Harlan's office felt thick, as if the walls were absorbing the weight of the paper stacks covering her desk. I sat across from her, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Lydia was studying the printout of the unexecuted conservation restriction I had found in the town basement. She held it like it was a fragile, ancient artifact. "This changes the texture of the fight." "Sarah," Lydia said, finally looking up. If your father had signed this and recorded it, the development value of the back acreage would have evaporated. You cannot build a luxury cul-de-sac on land that is legally designated for watershed protection. But he did not sign it. I said, "He started it," Lydia corrected. She tapped the paper. Intent matters. But here is the problem. The conservation restriction blocks development, which scares away buyers like Ridgewell. But the lien from Moreland Finance forces a sale to pay the debt. I see the pincer movement. I said, the compliance officer in me taking over. Moreland creates the financial pressure to sell. Ridgewell, or their proxy, North Pine, offers the quick cash exit. They are squeezing us from both sides. Exactly, Lydia said. And North Pine's cash offer suddenly looks less like a rescue and more like a coordinated extraction. They knew your father was sick, they knew the estate would be vulnerable, and they knew Evan was weak. I added softly. Lydia did not contradict me. She simply closed the file. I'm going to file an emergency request with the probate court to delay any transfer of property until we can clarify the executor authority. But Sarah, the lien is a recorded debt. Unless we can prove fraud, the house has to pay for it eventually. I left her office with a singular purpose. I needed to understand the mechanics of Evan's debt. Jonah had mentioned Red Alder Lodge. If that was where the debt was born, that was where I needed to go. Red Alder Lodge sat 5 miles outside of town, tucked behind a screen of dense pines on County Road 9. I expected a neon sign or a bouncer, but the entrance was discreet. A stone pillar with a small brass plaque and a paved driveway that wound back into the woods. It looked like a country club that had decided to stop accepting new members in 1980. I parked my Subaru between a Mercedes and a vintage Jaguar. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but I forced my face into a mask of polite curiosity. I walked up the stone steps and pushed open the heavy oak doors. The interior smelled of old leather, cigar smoke, and money. It was quiet, the kind of hushed atmosphere usually reserved for libraries or church sanctuaries. A man in a vest sat behind a reception desk, reading a newspaper. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, not unkindly. "I hope so," I said, channeling my best corporate voice. "I am Sarah Coleman. I am looking for a venue for a corporate retreat. Someone mentioned the lodge might have event space." The man frowned slightly. "We are a private club, Ms. Coleman. We generally do not rent to the public." "Oh, I understood that." I lied smoothly. "My father was a member years ago. I thought perhaps—" I let the sentence trail off. Stepping past the desk to look into the main lounge. It was empty, save for a few older men playing chess by the fire. But down a hallway to the left, I heard a sound that made my stomach turn over. It was a laugh, high-pitched, nervous, and desperate. It was Evan. I turned toward the hallway before the man at the desk could stop me. "The restrooms?" I asked, pointing. "Just down there," he said, distracted by a ringing phone. I walked quickly down the hall, the plush carpet swallowing the sound of my boots. The laughter had come from behind a set of double doors at the end of the corridor. As I got closer, the laughter died, replaced by the murmur of voices. I stopped outside the door. I knew I should not listen. I knew it was dangerous. But I leaned in. "Time is not the issue." "Evan," a voice said. It was a male voice, hard and flat. It sounded like gravel crunching under a tire. "The issue is stability." "I am stable," Evan protested. His voice was thin. "I have the offer. North Pine is ready to wire the funds. I just need my sister to sign off. She is careful. She works in compliance." "Compliance," the hard voice repeated. It sounded like he was tasting a rotten piece of fruit. "Your sister is the problem. Evan, if she starts pulling threads, she is going to annoy people who do not like to be annoyed. I will handle her." Evan said, "I promise. You have promised a lot of things." I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. I had heard enough. I turned to leave, but my elbow bumped a small table in the hallway, knocking a vase of dried flowers to the floor. It didn't break, but the clatter was loud in the silence. The double doors swung open. Evan stood there. He was wearing the same suit from the funeral, now rumpled and stained. Behind him, sitting at a round table covered in green felt, sat two men in suits. They did not look like mobsters. They looked like bankers. One of them was holding a fountain pen. "Sarah?" Evan whispered. His face went gray. I stared at him. I stared at the men behind him. "I was just looking for the restroom," I said, my voice trembling. Evan stepped out into the hall and pulled the doors shut behind him. He grabbed my arm, his grip painful. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. "Are you crazy?" I pulled my arm away. "I am crazy? You are in there discussing me like I am an obstacle to be removed. Who are they? Evan?" He looked over his shoulder at the closed doors, terrified. "Go to the car," he said. "Now." He pushed me toward the exit. I walked out into the cold air. My legs shaking, I got into my car and locked the doors. A minute later, Evan burst out of the lodge. Looking like he was running from a fire, he scrambled into his truck parked 2 spots away and tore out of the driveway. I followed him. I wasn't going to let him run this time. He pulled over about a mile down the road, in a gravel turnout overlooking the river. He got out and leaned against the hood of his truck, burying his face in his hands. I pulled up behind him and got out. The wind was whipping my hair across my face. "Talk," I said. He looked up. He looked younger than I had ever seen him, stripped of all his bluster. "It is a club, Sarah," he said. "Membership nights, Tuesday and Thursday. It is not dice in an alley. It is poker, bridge, high stakes. And you lost." I said, "I won at first," he said pleadingly. "I won $5,000 in a night. I thought I could pay off Dad's medical bills myself. I thought I could save us. But then I lost. And they offered me credit." "Who offered you credit?" "The house," Evan said. "But the debt. They sold it." "Sold it?" "To investors," he said. He laughed. A bitter, jagged sound. That is what they call them. Investors. "The men in that room? They buy the debt sheets from the club. They are not criminals. Sarah, they are hedge fund guys. They buy the debt, and then they use it to acquire things, to acquire houses." I said. He nodded. "When I couldn't pay the marker, they sold my debt to Morrowland Finance. Morrowland is just the collection arm." I looked at the river, churning gray and cold below us. It was so clean, so corporate. "They didn't break your legs. They just bought your mortgage. And now they want the house," Evan said. "And if I don't give it to them, they are going to file charges. For fraud. For the signature on the loan documents. They have it all. Sarah, they own me." I looked at my brother. He was a fool. Yes, he was weak, but he was being eaten alive by a machine he didn't understand. "Go home, Evan," I said. "Do not sign anything. Do not talk to them. Just go home." He looked at me, surprised. "You aren't going to yell?" "I am past yelling." I said, "I am working." I drove back to town and called Jonah Pike. We met in the parking lot of the grocery store, sitting in his sedan with the heater running. I told him everything. Evan, the lodge, the investors. Jonah listened, his jaw set tight. "It fits," he said. "I have seen this pattern in 3 other counties. A property goes into distress, usually because of a death or a divorce. Suddenly, there is a high-interest lien from a shadow lender like Morrowland. The owner panics. Then, a friendly buyer like North Pine swoops in with a cash offer that is just enough to cover the debt and leave the owner with a few $1,000s. And the house?" I asked. "The house gets rezoned," Jonah said, "or demolished. And suddenly, Ridgewell Development announces a new project on the site. It is a pipeline," I said, "from the gambling table to the bulldozer, and it is legal," Jonah said. "Technically, unless you can prove collusion, unless you can prove that the people running the game are the same people buying the land." I drove back to Marrow Lane feeling a cold fury building in my chest. They had targeted us. They had waited for my father to die. And then they had sprung the trap on my grieving brother. When I walked into the house, the silence felt different. It felt heavy. I walked into the den. I stopped. The door to the closet where Dad kept his old hunting gear was open. The lock on the desk drawer, the one I had checked yesterday, was scratched. The wood splintered around the keyhole. I froze. Someone had been here. I walked through the room. The papers I had left on the desk were shuffled. The order was wrong. I was precise about my papers. Someone had gone through them. I checked the rest of the house. Nothing obvious was missing. The TV was there. My laptop was on the kitchen table where I had left it. But the feeling of violation was physical. It wasn't a robbery. It was a search. They were looking for something. I thought about the hollowed-out dictionary. I had the letter in my purse. Thank God I had taken it. But what else were they looking for? I went back to the den and sat in Dad's chair. I ran my hand over the scratched lock. They weren't just pressuring Evan anymore. They were treating the house like an asset they already owned. They were taking inventory. My phone rang. It was Lydia. Sarah, I filed the emergency request. She said, "The hearing is set for Tuesday. It should freeze any sale." "Thank you." "Lydia," I said. "But Sarah, Evan was here this afternoon." My heart sank. What did he do? "He signed a document for North Pine," she said. "He brought it to me, thinking it would help. He called it a letter of intent." "And what is it really?" I asked. "It is a binding exclusivity agreement," Lydia said. "It locks the estate into selling to North Pine if the lien is not satisfied within 30 days. He gave away our ability to market the property to anyone else." I closed my eyes. Desperation made him reckless. He thought he was buying time. But he was just tightening the noose. "He's trying to fix it," I said, mostly to myself. "He is drowning." "Sarah," Lydia said, "you need to find whatever leverage your father had. That name, Mara Vance." I hung up and went upstairs. I dug through the boxes Evan had packed in the hallway. I found Dad's old address book, a battered leather thing held together with a rubber band. I flipped through the pages. M, N, O, P, V. There it was, written in blue ink that had faded with time. Mara Vance, 404 Creek Road, Hollow Creek. I grabbed my keys. It was dark, and I was exhausted. But I couldn't wait. The house felt unsafe. I needed to be moving. Hollow Creek was a town that time had forgotten. A cluster of houses 10 miles north of Briar Glen. The road narrowed, winding through dense woods and over wooden bridges that rattled under my tires. Number 404 was a small cottage at the end of a dirt driveway. The porch light was off, but a blue glow flickered in the window. The television. I knocked on the door. The wood was rough under my knuckles. A moment later, the door opened. A woman stood there. She was short, with hair the color of steel wool chopped close to her head. She wore a flannel shirt and jeans covered in paint stains. Her face was lined, sharp, and intelligent. "Mara Vance?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. She took in my coat, my boots, my face. "You have his chin," she said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Frank Coleman." She said, "You are his daughter, the one who went away." "I am Sarah." I said, "I know who you are," she said. She stepped back. "You better come in." The inside of the house was a chaotic maze of paper. Maps were rolled up and stacked in corners like firewood. Drafting tables were covered in blueprints. It smelled of graphite and wood smoke. "You are a surveyor?" I asked, stepping over a stack of yellowed papers. "Retired," she said. "I was the county surveyor for 30 years. I mapped every inch of this valley before the developers started carving it up like a Thanksgiving turkey. I found a letter from my father." I said, "He told me to find you." Mara nodded. She went to the kitchen and came back with 2 beers. She handed me one. "Frank was a stubborn son of a bitch," she said, sitting down in a worn armchair. "But he was honest. That is a rare commodity these days." "Why did he want me to find you?" I asked. "Because of the water," she said. "The water?" Mara unrolled a large map on the coffee table. It was a topographical map of Briar Glen. She pointed to a blue line running behind where Marrow Lane would be, the watershed. she said. Years ago. Ridgewell Development came sniffing around. They wanted to buy your dad's back acreage. They wanted to put in a luxury cul-de-sac. 5 houses, $1 million views. Dad wouldn't sell. I said, no, he wouldn't. But not just because he liked the trees. He knew that if they built there, the runoff would poison the creek. It feeds the lower aquifer. He refused to sign off on the land split. And that stopped them? For a while, Mara said. But Ridgewell doesn't stop. They just wait. They knew he would die eventually. They knew the land would pass to his kids. She looked at me pointedly. They didn't count on the easement. She added, I pulled the folded property survey from my pocket, the one I had found behind the dresser. Is this it? Mara glanced at it. That is the rough sketch, but the real leverage isn't on paper. It is in the history. She stood up and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner. She dug through a hanging folder and pulled out a large, stiff sheet of paper. Your dad wasn't just protecting the water. She said, he was protecting a neighbor. She laid the paper down. It was a hand-drawn map, done in ink, detailed and precise. It showed our property and a small, sliver-like lot adjacent to the back acreage. See this? Mara pointed to a dotted line running right through where the cul-de-sac would go. That is a right-of-way, an access road. Who does it belong to? I asked. It belongs to the owner of that landlocked parcel, Mara said. A man named Caleb Rourke. Caleb Rourke? I asked. I had never heard the name. He is a mechanic, Mara said. A quiet man. Years ago. Your dad granted him this right-of-way so he could access his back lot to store equipment. It was a handshake deal. Mostly. But they wrote it down on this map and they both signed it. I looked at the bottom of the map. There was my father's signature, and next to it, a scrawl that read, Caleb Rourke. Was it recorded? I asked. The compliance officer in me needed to know. No, Mara said. That is the problem. It was never filed with the county. Technically, a title search won't find it. That is why Ridgewell thinks the land is clear. So it is useless, I said, feeling a wave of disappointment. Not useless, Mara said sharply. In Pennsylvania, an unrecorded easement can still be valid if it has been in continuous use and there is proof of intent. This map is proof of intent. She tapped the paper. If you can prove this easement exists, Ridgewell cannot build their road. If they cannot build their road, the land is worthless to them. And if the land is worthless to them, I whispered, then Morrowland doesn't want the house. Exactly, Mara said. They are buying the house to get the land, kill the development potential, and you kill the deal. She rolled up the map and handed it to me. Take it, she said. Find Caleb Rourke. He is still around. He won't like being dragged into this, but he owes Frank. I took the map. It felt heavy in my hands. It was a weapon, a flimsy, paper weapon, but it was all I had. Thank you. Mara, I said. She looked at me, her face softening slightly. Your dad was worried about you, she said. He told me once that you were too much like him. You internalize everything. I looked away. He was right. Drive safe. Sarah, she said, and watch your back. These people, they have a lot of money on the table. I drove back toward Briar Glen, the map resting on the seat beside me. The rain had started again, a slow, steady drizzle. I felt a strange sense of calm. I had a direction now. I wasn't just reacting to Evan's mess. I was uncovering a strategy my father had left for me. My phone buzzed on the console, a voicemail notification. I pressed play, the sound filling the quiet car. Sarah, hi, it's Dina Kessler. Her voice was bright, cheerful, utterly synthetic. I just wanted to update you. Great news. North Pine has authorized me to raise the offer on the home. We are prepared to go up another $10,000. And, she paused, a dramatic little beat. We are also willing to include a relocation support package for you. We can help you with moving costs. Maybe find you a nice rental in town for a few weeks while you get settled before you head back to wherever it is you live. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Relocation support. She was speaking to me like I was a tenant. like I was a squatter in my own childhood home. She was offering to pay me to leave quietly. Give me a call. Sarah, let's wrap this up so you can get back to your life. The message ended. The insult hit harder than the threat of foreclosure. She thought I was just someone passing through. She thought I just wanted money. She didn't understand. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't even about the house. It was about the fact that they thought they could erase us. They thought they could wipe the Coleman name off Marrow Lane and replace it with a cul-de-sac. I turned off the radio. I listened to the sound of the tires on the wet pavement. I wasn't going back to my life. Not yet. I was going to find Caleb Rourke, and I was going to burn their deal to the ground. I decided to stop feeling. Feelings were what got Evan into this mess. Feelings were what made my father hide the truth to protect us. Feelings were messy, inefficient, and currently, they were losing us the house. I needed to be what I was paid to be. I needed to be a compliance officer. I woke up at 5 a.m, long before the sun hit the peeling paint of the front porch. I went downstairs, made a pot of black coffee strong enough to strip paint, and cleared the dining room table. I didn't treat it like a family table. I treated it like a desk. I laid out everything I had found. The lien document, the letter from Dad, the map from Mara Vance, the sticky note, the funeral program. I opened my laptop and created a blank spreadsheet. I didn't care that I was using my company machine for personal business. I needed the grid. I needed the logic of rows and columns. I started building a timeline. Column A was the date. Column B was the event. Column C was the source. I started with the lien. September 14th, 2025. Morrow Land Finance records a $68,000 debt against the property. Then I looked at Evan's bank statements, which I had found in a pile of unopened mail on the kitchen counter. September 15th, a withdrawal of $5,000. September 20th, another withdrawal. He was bleeding cash days after the lien hit. Then I looked at the North Pine card Dina Kessler had given me. I looked at the email chain on Evan's phone, which he had left unlocked on the counter the night before in his drunken stupor. I scrolled back. My finger hovered over the trackpad. August 30th, 2025. Subject: touching base. Marrow Lane valuation. From Dina Kessler. I froze. August 30th. That was 2 weeks before the lien was recorded. That was a month before Dad really started to fade. Dina Kessler hadn't just appeared at the funeral. She hadn't just heard about a distressed property and swooped in. She had been talking to Evan before the debt was even official. She wasn't a vulture circling a carcass. She was a hunter who had helped set the trap. I typed it into the timeline. The pattern was clear. Dina approaches Evan. Evan gets desperate. The gambling debt spikes. The lien appears. The pressure mounts. Dad dies. Dina reappears with a solution. It was an engineered foreclosure. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Evan shuffled into the kitchen, looking like a ghost. His skin was gray, his eyes bloodshot. He poured himself a cup of coffee with a shaking hand. "Good morning," I said. My voice was flat. He looked at the dining room table, covered in paper. "What is all this?" "This is the autopsy," I said. "Not of Dad, of the house." Evan flinched. "Sarah, please, I do not have the energy for a lecture." "I am not lecturing," I said. "I am investigating." "And Evan, I found something interesting. Dina Kessler emailed you in August." He froze, the mug halfway to his mouth. "She knew." I said, "She knew you were in trouble before Dad even signed the lien. Did she introduce you to the investors?" Evan put the mug down. He didn't answer. "Did she?" I pressed. She mentioned people who could help," he whispered. "She said there were private lenders who understood difficult situations." I nodded. It was exactly as Jonah had said. A pipeline. I packed up my papers. I had enough for the morning. I had a meeting with Lydia. When I arrived at Kite in Harlan, Lydia was already waiting for me. She looked more energized than I had ever seen her. She was holding a magnifying glass over a document on her desk. "Come look at this." "Sarah," she said, waving me over. I walked around the desk. It was the lien document again. The The one from Morrowland Finance. Look at the notarization block, she said. I leaned in. Subscribed and sworn to before me this 14th day of September, 2025. The stamp belonged to Lakeshore Mobile Notary Services. The signature was a scrawl. Okay, I said. It is notarized. That makes it legal. Does it? Lydia asked. She pulled another file from her drawer. This is your father's medical log from the Briar Glen Clinic. Look at the entry for September 14th. I looked. Patient arrived, 9 in the morning. Infusion therapy started, 9:30 in the morning. Patient discharged, 4 in the afternoon. I looked back at the notary block. The timestamp next to the signature read 11 in the morning. Dad was hooked up to an IV at the clinic at 11 in the morning. Lydia said, he was miles away from the house, and Lakeshore Mobile Notary is a one-woman operation run by a woman named Brenda Miller. She operates out of her van. So he couldn't have signed it at the house. I said, and a mobile notary cannot enter a sterile infusion clinic to notarize a loan document without logging in at the front desk. Lydia said, I called the clinic. There is no record of a Brenda Miller visiting that day. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. He wasn't there. I said, he did not sign it in front of the notary. Lydia said, that means the notarization is invalid. And if the notarization is invalid, the recording is defective. It is fraud. I said, it is leverage. Lydia corrected, it is enough to get a judge to pause everything. But Sarah, someone had to bring that document to the notary. Someone had to tell Brenda Miller that it was your father's signature. I knew who it was. I drove back to the house. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue, a mocking contrast to the storm inside my head. Evan was sitting on the porch swing, staring out at the overgrown lawn. He looked like a child waiting for punishment. I walked up the steps and stood in front of him. I didn't block his view. I just stood there. The notary, I said. He didn't look up. Lydia found the discrepancy. Evan, Dad was at the clinic. He didn't sign the lien in front of the notary. Evan closed his eyes. You took the papers to him, didn't you? I asked. He nodded slowly. And then what? I asked. Did you take them to the notary? Did you tell her he signed them? I knew her, Evan whispered. Brenda. She did me a favor. I told her Dad was too sick to travel. I told her it was his signature. Was it? I asked. The question hung in the air like a blade. Did he actually sign it? Evan? Or did you guide his hand? Evan looked up at me then, and his face was wet with tears. He signed it. He sobbed. I swear to you, Sarah. He signed it. I explained it to him. I told him I needed help. I told him it was a bridge loan to cover the bills. Did you tell him it was for gambling debt? I asked. I told him it was for the business, Evan cried. I told him I had made some bad investments. I didn't want him to know about the tables. I wanted him to think I was trying to build something, and he believed you. I said, he looked so confused. Sarah, he was on those meds. He just looked at me and said, if it helps you, son, and he signed it. Evan put his head in his hands. I took the papers to Brenda, he said, his voice muffled. I told her I witnessed it. She stamped it. I thought I was fixing it. I thought I could win the money back before anyone knew. I think I tricked him without meaning to. He whispered. The sentence broke me. It wasn't the malice of a criminal. It was the incompetence of a drowning man pulling his rescuer down with him. I sat down on the swing next to him. The chains groaned under our weight. I could destroy you for this, I said quietly. I could take this to the police. You committed fraud. You elder abused our father. I know, he said, but I am not going to. I said. He stopped crying. He looked at me, his eyes wide. Why? He asked. Because you are my brother, I said, and because if you go to jail, we definitely lose the house. Morrowland will foreclose while you are being arraigned. I took a deep breath. I was about to make a deal with the devil, but it was the only way to save the family. I am going to make you a proposal, Evan, and you are going to say yes. I am listening, he said. I will help you restructure the debt. I said, I will use my credit, my savings. Whatever I have to do to get Morrowland off our back, I will take on the liability. You would do that? On two conditions. I said, 1. You sign a sworn affidavit detailing every interaction you had with Dina Kessler, when she called, what she said, and how she introduced you to the investors. We need to prove predation. I can do that, he said. And 2, I said, you stop communicating with North Pine. You stop communicating with the investors. If your phone rings, you hand it to me. If they come to the door, you go upstairs. You are done handling it. I am handling it. Evan looked at me. For the first time in days. The tension in his shoulders dropped. He looked like a man who had been holding up a collapsing ceiling and had finally been handed a beam. Okay, he said. Okay. Sarah, I promise. Good, I said. Now go wash your face. We have work to do. I left Evan at the house and drove into town to meet Jonah. He had texted me an address. Kerrigan and Moss Title Partners. It was a small office on a side street, tucked away behind a bakery. The windows were dusty, and the sign was hand-painted. It didn't look like the kind of place that handled million-dollar transactions. It looked like the kind of place that remembered who owned what before the computers took over. Jonah was waiting inside, talking to an older man who was buried behind a wall of manila folders. Sarah, this is Arthur Moss, Jonah said. He has been examining titles in this county since 1980. Arthur looked up. He had thick glasses and ink stains on his fingers. Ms. Coleman, he said, Jonah tells me you have a lien problem. I handed him the Morrowland document. Arthur took it. He didn't just read it. He felt the paper. He held it up to the light. He ran his finger over the recording stamp. Morrowland Finance, he muttered. Delaware LLC. Registered agent is a P.O. box in Wilmington. He pulled a ledger from his shelf and opened it. He flipped through pages until he found what he was looking for. Here's the chain, he said. He pointed to a series of entries. Your father's deed is clear. No mortgages since 2010. Then, suddenly, this lien appears. But look at the assignment. I looked. There was a small notation in the margin of the lien document. Assigned to CMH Trust. The debt was sold the same day it was recorded. Arthur said, Morrowland originated it and immediately flipped it to CMH Trust. Who is CMH Trust? I asked. Crown Meridian Holdings, Jonah said from the corner. They are a holding company. Massive. They buy distressed debt in bulk. But here is the trick, Arthur said. He tapped the paper. The assignment wasn't recorded in the main index. It was recorded as a correction. It hides the transfer from a casual search. Why would they do that? I asked. To keep the chain looking simple, Arthur said. To make it look like a local dispute between a man and a lender. Rather than a piece of a global portfolio. He looked at me, his eyes magnified by the glasses. This is designed to look clean. Ms. Coleman, that is not the same as being clean. This paperwork was prepared by someone who knows exactly how to obscure the true ownership of the debt. Ridgewell, I said. Arthur shrugged. I cannot say for sure, but Ridgewell has been acquiring a lot of contiguous parcels lately, and they always seem to have clean title, even when the history is messy. He handed the document back to me. Be careful, he said. You are not fighting a bank. You are fighting an algorithm. I walked out of the title office with Jonah. The town of Briar Glen felt smaller, more fragile. There is something else, Jonah said as we stood on the sidewalk. What? I asked. There is a public hearing tonight at the town hall, he said. The Planning Commission. I don't care about the Planning Commission. I said, You should, Jonah said. The agenda item is Downtown Revitalization Zone B. And? Zone B includes Marrow Lane, Jonah said. I felt a chill. What are they proposing? Rezoning, he said. Changing the designation from residential historic to mixed-use commercial, if they do that. I said, the property taxes triple, and the development restrictions loosen. Jonah added, it allows for higher density, condos, retail. It makes the land worth 10 times what it is now, but only if you own it. I said, exactly, Jonah said. If you lose the house now, Ridgewell picks it up for the cost of the lien plus a little extra. Then the zoning changes, and they make millions. Your house is the domino. Sarah, if Marrow Lane falls, the whole hillside goes commercial. I checked my watch. The hearing was at 7. I am going. I said, You cannot speak. Jonah warned. You are not the owner of record yet. Probate is still pending. I don't need to speak. I said, I need to see who is in the room. The town hall meeting room was packed. It smelled of wet wool and floor wax. There were folding chairs set up in rows, filled with locals, people in flannel shirts and work boots, looking anxious. At the front of the room, behind a long table, sat the commissioners. They looked bored. To the side, near the projector screen, stood a group of men in suits. They looked like the men I had seen at Red Alder Lodge. Polished, indifferent. I scanned the room. I saw Dina Kessler in the second row. She was typing on her phone, ignoring the proceedings. I moved to the back, finding a spot near the door. The meeting began. The chairman mumbled through the minutes. Then they opened the floor for the revitalization proposal. A man from the group of suits walked to the podium. He introduced himself as a consultant for Ridgewell Development. He spoke about economic growth and modernizing the tax base. He showed slides of gleaming glass buildings and paved walkways. He showed a map. My heart stopped. The map showed the revitalization zone. It covered our entire neighborhood, and right in the center, where our house stood, was a gray block labeled Phase 1 Access. They weren't just going to build on our land, they were going to use our land as the gateway to the rest of the hill. I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned. It was Mara Vance. She didn't smile. She was wearing a heavy canvas jacket and a wool cap. She looked like she had just come from the woods. She didn't say a word. She slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand, then turned and walked out the door. I waited until she was gone, then unfolded the paper. It was a note, written in pencil. Caleb Rourke is alive. He won't like this. Rourke's Auto, 88 Mill Road. I looked at the map on the screen again. Phase 1 Access. I looked at the note. I slipped out of the meeting. I had seen enough. Mill Road was on the other side of the tracks, the industrial underbelly of Briar Glen. It was a street of warehouses and scrapyards. Number 88 was a cinder block building with a faded sign that read, Rourke's Auto Repair. The garage bay doors were closed, but a light was on in the side office. I parked and walked to the door. I knocked. A moment later, the door opened. The man who stood there was in his 60s, but he looked older. He was built like a heavyweight boxer who had gone to seed, broad shoulders, thick neck, a belly pushing against his grease-stained work shirt. His hands were black with oil. We are closed, he rumbled. Mr. Rourke? I asked. I am Sarah Coleman, Frank Coleman's daughter. The name hit him. He stopped closing the door. He looked at me, really looked at me, with eyes that were surprisingly clear and blue in his rough face. Frank's girl, he said. His voice was gravel. Can I talk to you? I asked. It is about the land. He hesitated, then stepped back. Come in. Don't touch anything. Everything has grease on it. I stepped into the office. It was cluttered with parts manuals and calendars from tool companies. There was a smell of old oil and coffee. He cleared a stack of invoices off a plastic chair. Sit. I sat. He leaned against a filing cabinet. Crossing his massive arms, I heard Frank past. He said, I am sorry. He was a good man. Thank you. I said, Mr. Rourke, I found a map. A map you signed with my father. Caleb nodded slowly. The easement. Ridgewell Development is trying to rezone the hill. I said, they want to put a road through our property, through the back acreage. They have been wanting that for 20 years. Caleb said. He picked up a rag and started wiping his hands. Though they didn't get any cleaner, Mara Vance told me about the agreement. I said, she said you have a right of way. I do, Caleb said, but it ain't recorded. Frank and I, we didn't need lawyers. We shook hands. That handshake might save my house. I said, if we can prove the agreement exists, we can block the access road. Caleb looked at the floor. He seemed tired. They came to see me, he said softly. Who? 2 men in suits. Last week, they offered me $50,000 to sign a quitclaim deed. To renounce any interest in the Coleman property. I held my breath. $50,000 was a lot of money for a mechanic on Mill Road. Did you sign it? I asked. Caleb looked up at me. He smiled. A small, crooked thing. Let me tell you a story. Sarah. He tossed the rag onto the desk. 15 years ago. This shop was going under. My wife got sick. The medical bills ate everything. The bank was going to take the tools, the lift, the building, everything. He paused, looking at a framed photo of a woman on the wall. I didn't tell anyone. I was too proud. But Frank figured it out. He brought his truck in for an oil change. He saw the foreclosure notice on the desk. What did he do? I asked. He didn't write me a check. Caleb said, he knew I wouldn't take charity. He went to the bank. He put up his own land, the back acreage, as collateral to guarantee my loan modification. My eyes widened. Dad had risked the land for this man? He never told me. Caleb said, the bank manager told me a week later. Frank risked his own property to save my business. When I asked him why, he just said, good mechanics are hard to find. Caleb, keep your word, and we are square. Caleb looked at me. They offered me $50,000. He said, I told them to get the hell off my property. He leaned forward. Your father asked for nothing. Sarah, he didn't want interest. He didn't want a piece of the business. He just wanted a neighbor he could trust. That is a rare thing. It is, I whispered, feeling tears prick my eyes. I will testify. Caleb said, I still have the original map too. And I have the letters Frank wrote me about the boundary line. They can't build their road if I have a legal right of access. Thank you. I said, don't thank me. Caleb said, I am just keeping my word. I drove home with a feeling I hadn't had since I arrived. Hope. It was fragile, but it was there. My father hadn't just left me a mess. He had left me a network. He had invested in people. And now, those investments were paying out. Quiet decency. That was his legacy. Not the money in the bank, but the mechanic who had turned down $50,000 because of a handshake 15 years ago. I pulled into the driveway. The house was dark. Evan? I called out as I unlocked the door. Silence. I walked into the kitchen. The coffee cup from the morning was still on the table. But Evan wasn't there. I went upstairs. His bedroom door was open. His bed was made. I went back down to the kitchen. My heart started to race. On the counter, where I had left my laptop, there was a piece of paper, not a legal document, a page torn from a notebook. I picked it up. Sarah, I can't let you do this. I can't let you take on my debt. It isn't fair. You have worked too hard. I am going to fix it. I am going to end it. I called Dina. I told her I am ready to sign. I am sorry. Evan. The paper fluttered from my hand to the floor. Terror, cold and absolute, washed over me. It wasn't the fear that he was going to hurt himself. It was the fear that he was going to do exactly what he said. He was going to try to be the hero. He was going to sacrifice the house to save me from his mistakes. He was going to confess. He was going to sign. He was going to give them everything they wanted because he loved me too much to let me fight his war. I grabbed my keys. I didn't know where he was, but I knew where Dina was. I ran out the door, the note burning a hole in my mind. I am fixing it. He wasn't fixing it. He was finishing it. My phone sat on the passenger seat, the screen glowing with the interface of the toll road account I had linked to the family vehicles years ago. It was a remnant of my organizational compulsion, a digital leash I had forgotten about until 20 minutes ago. Vehicle: Ford. F-150. Location: Harbor Key Shuttle Lot. Time: 8:42 in the evening. Harbor Key wasn't a destination, it was a transfer point. It was a bleak stretch of asphalt under the highway overpass where the buses from the Atlantic City casinos idled, waiting to ferry gamblers back and forth from the suburbs. It was a place where people left their cars when they wanted to disappear into the noise and lights for 12 hours. I drove fast. The rain had turned into a thick, miserable mist that coated the windshield in a greasy film. The wipers slapped back and forth, counting down the seconds. When I pulled into the lot, it was mostly empty. The weekend rush hadn't started yet. Under the yellow buzz of a sodium vapor light, I saw Evan's truck. It was parked crookedly. Taking up 2 spaces, the engine was off. I pulled up alongside it and cut my lights. I got out. The air smelled of diesel fumes and damp concrete. Evan was sitting in the driver's seat. His hands were on the wheel, gripping it at 10 and 2, staring straight ahead at a concrete retaining wall. He looked like a man waiting for a crash that had already happened. I opened his door. He didn't turn. "Evan," I said. He blinked slowly. The hollows under his eyes were deep, purple bruises of exhaustion. He looked skeletal in the harsh light. "I was going to wait for the bus," he said. His voice was a dry rattle, but I missed it. "Where were you going?" I asked. Though I knew, I called Dina. He said, "I told her to bring the papers here. I told her I would sign the deed over right here in the lot if she promised to make the debt go away." I felt a surge of nausea. He was trying to sell the house in a parking lot. "She isn't coming." "Evan," I said, "she doesn't need to meet you here. She knows you're desperate. She's letting you marinate." He turned to look at me then. His face was wet. I wasn't sure if it was sweat or tears. I just wanted to stop. "Sarah, I cannot sleep. I cannot eat. Every time the phone rings, I think it is the police, or them. I just want it to be over." "It won't be over if you sign," I said. "It will just be a different kind of hell. Get in my car." He didn't move. "Evan, get in the car." He slumped forward, resting his forehead on the steering wheel. A sob ripped out of him, a jagged, ugly sound that echoed in the empty lot. I reached in and took the keys out of the ignition. I put a hand on his shoulder. It felt thin under his jacket. "Come home," I said softly. The drive back to Marrow Lane was silent. Evan sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing telephone poles. He looked like a child who had been picked up from the principal's office, shrunken and ashamed. When we got inside, the house felt warm, a stark contrast to the cold industrial lot. I made tea. It seemed like a ridiculous, inadequate thing to do, but I didn't know what else to offer. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we used to do our homework, the same table where Dad used to read the Sunday paper. "Why?" I asked. I didn't scream it. I just asked. Evan wrapped his hands around the mug. He didn't look at me. "You remember when Mom died?" he asked. "Of course," I said. "I was 20. You were 25. Dad stopped talking. Evan said, "He didn't stop speaking, but he stopped talking. He just went into the den and sat there. For months. The house got so quiet. And you went back to college. You had to. I wanted you to. I felt a pang of guilt, sharp and familiar. I had left. I had escaped the grief. I stayed." Evan said. I watched him fade. He stopped paying attention to the bills. The roof started leaking, and he didn't care. The gutters filled up. He just sat there, listening to his records. Evan took a breath. A shudder ran through him. I wanted to fix it. Sarah. I wanted to be the man he used to be. I wanted to be the provider. But I was just me. I was working at the lumber yard. I wasn't making enough to fix the roof and pay the taxes and keep the heat on. "So you gambled?" I asked. I heard guys at the yard talking about the games at Red Alder. He said, "Easy money. Just a few hands. I went one night. I walked out with $2,000. His eyes lit up for a second, a ghost of the addiction flickering. "I bought new shingles for the roof." He said, "Dad noticed." He smiled. He said, "Good job, son." That was the first time he had smiled in a year. I felt my heart break a little. I thought I found the answer. Evan whispered, "I thought I could win our stability back. I thought I could buy Dad's happiness. So I went back. And I lost. So I went back again to win it back. And I lost more." He looked at me. The shame was total. It wasn't about the rush. "Sarah, not at first. It was about the silence. I just wanted the house to be okay. I wanted him to be proud of me, and then I couldn't stop. And now I have lost the only thing he had left." "You haven't lost it yet," I said. I reached across the table and took his hand. It was cold. "We are going to fight them, Evan, but not with money. We are going to fight them with the truth." The next morning, the war moved from the shadows to the paperwork. Lydia filed the formal challenge to the lien at 9 in the morning. She cited the notarization discrepancy and the evidence of Dad's presence at the clinic. It was a strong motion. It should have paused everything for weeks. Morrowland Finance responded by noon. I was in Lydia's office when the fax came through. It screeched out of the machine. Page after page of dense legal argument. Lydia read it, her frown deepening with every line. "They are not backing down," she said. "They are claiming the notary log is a clerical error. They have an affidavit from Brenda Miller swearing she met your father at the house later that day. She is lying." I said, "Of course she is lying," Lydia said. "But now it is a factual dispute, and Morrowland has filed a motion for an expedited hearing. They want to settle the title issue in 10 days. 10 days, I asked. Can they do that? They can if they argue that the asset is wasting. Lydia said, "They are claiming the house is falling into disrepair and losing value. They are painting us as negligent stewards. They want a court order to force the sale immediately to preserve the equity. They are trying to bleed us out." I said, "They know I can't afford a long legal battle. They want to force a settlement." Lydia took off her glasses. "Sarah, this is going to get expensive. Morrowland has a team of attorneys. I am a small-town estate lawyer. I can hold the line, but they are going to bury us in motions. Do whatever it takes." I said, "I have some savings. I will cash out my retirement if I have to." "Don't do that yet," Lydia warned. "Let's see what we can find on Dina." I left the office and met Jonah at the library. He had set up a command center at one of the back tables, surrounded by stacks of public records. Jonah was in his element. He wasn't emotional about this. He was an auditor. He looked for anomalies. "I tracked Dina Kessler," he said, sliding a laptop toward me. "She has worked for 3 different real estate firms in the last 5 years. He said, "Look at the timeline." I looked at the screen. 2021, Horizon Realty, Allentown. 2023, Valley View Properties, Scranton. 2025, North Pine Property Solutions, Briar Glen. Now look at the foreclosure data for those areas during those times. Jonah said. He clicked a tab. A graph appeared. In each city, during Dina's tenure, there was a statistically significant spike in involuntary foreclosures on properties owned by elderly residents or estates. "She is a specialist," Jonah said. "She goes in, identifies the vulnerable assets, and facilitates the transfer to holding companies like Crown Meridian. It is a pattern." I said, "It is," Jonah agreed, "but it is circumstantial. We can't prove she did anything illegal just because she worked there. We need a smoking gun. We need to prove she colluded with the notary or the lender." I thought about the affidavit Evan had agreed to sign. It would help, but it was the word of a gambling addict against a polished professional. "I need to know what Dad was doing." I said, "I need to know why he didn't finish the conservation restriction." I spent the afternoon at the Briar Glen Heritage Trust. It was a small nonprofit housed in a renovated grist mill by the creek. The director, a woman named Alice who wore hand-knit sweaters and smelled of lavender, remembered my father well. Frank was very concerned about the legacy of the land. Alice told me he came to us about a year ago. He wanted to discuss placing the house into a stewardship program. "Why didn't he do it?" I asked. "He was worried about the debt," Alice said. "He told me he had some obligations he needed to clear up first. He wanted to hand the house over to the trust free and clear, with a life tenancy for his children. He was trying to save it from Evan." I realized he knew Evan's problem was spiraling. He wanted to lock the house away so Evan couldn't gamble it, but he ran out of time. Alice said sadly, "We drafted the papers, but he never came back to sign the final transfer." I thanked her and walked back to my car. The town felt different. People I had known since kindergarten walked past me without smiling. I stopped at the grocery store to buy milk. The cashier, a woman named Becca, who used to cheat off my math tests, rang up my items in silence. "Heading back to the city soon?" she asked. It wasn't a friendly question. I am staying for a while. I said, I heard you are trying to kick Evan out. She said, she didn't look at me. She looked at the register screen. What? I asked. People are talking. Sarah, they say you came back to claim your inheritance. They say you are trying to sell the house out from under him, that big city corporate lawyer stuff. I felt the blood drain from my face. Ridgewell. I thought, they are controlling the narrative. They are painting me as the villain so the town won't look too closely at the land grab. That is not true. Becca. I said. She shrugged. Just what I heard. That will be $4.50. I walked out of the store. My face burning. It hurt because it touched on my deepest insecurity. I was the one who left. I was the one with the corporate job. Maybe I was the villain in their story. When I got home, I found Evan in the kitchen. He was pacing. I have to do something. Sarah. I said, we need to make a move that proves we are serious. What kind of move? Evan asked, looking terrified. I sat him down. This was going to be the hardest conversation yet. Lydia says Morrowland is going to argue that you are mismanaging the estate. I said, they are going to use your gambling against us. They will say you are wasting the asset. I know, Evan said. We have to get ahead of them. I said, we have to petition the probate court for supervision. What does that mean? It means we file a document admitting that the executor, you, is compromised. I said, we ask the court to appoint a co-administrator. Me? Evan went pale. You want me to tell the judge I'm incompetent? I want you to tell the judge you are honest. I said, if we admit it ourselves, Morrowland loses their leverage. They can't expose you if you have already exposed yourself. It takes the weapon out of their hands. Evan stared at the table. It was a public humiliation. It would be in the court record. Everyone in town would know. It is the only way to stop the expedited sale. I said, it shows the court we are trying to protect the house, not loot it. He sat there for a long time. The silence stretched, heavy and painful. Then, he nodded. Do it, he whispered. I don't care what they think anymore. I just want to save the house. He signed the petition right there on the kitchen table. His hand shook so badly the pen tore the paper. The hearing was set for the next morning. I couldn't sleep. The wind was howling around the eaves, rattling the old windows. I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling. I kept thinking about Dad's letter. Find Mara Vance. I had done that, but there had to be more. Dad was a man of contingencies. He never had just one plan. I got up and went down to the den. I turned on the desk lamp. The room was cold. I took the letter out of my purse, the one I had found in the hollowed-out dictionary. Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I read it again. I ran my fingers over the paper. It felt thick. I frowned. I held the page up to the light. It wasn't one sheet. It was 2 sheets, stuck together. I picked at the corner. There was a strip of clear tape, yellowed with age, holding a second, smaller piece of paper to the back of the first. My heart started to pound. I carefully peeled the tape back. The second page fell onto the desk. It was a scrawled note, written in haste. The handwriting was jagged, desperate. If they push you, show Lydia the Marrow Lane box. The Marrow Lane box? I had never heard of it. I looked around the room. A box? A safe? I started searching. I pulled books off the shelves. I looked under the rug. I checked the drawers again. Nothing. I sat down, frustrated. Think, Sarah. Think like him. Marrow Lane box. Marrow. Bone. Deep inside. I looked at the ventilation grate on the wall near the floor. It was an old cast-iron grate, painted over a dozen times, but one screw was shiny. The paint on the screw head was chipped. I grabbed a letter opener from the desk. I knelt down and worked the screw. It turned easily, too easily. I pulled the grate off. Inside the duct, sitting just out of sight, was a gray metal lockbox. I pulled it out. It was heavy. It was covered in dust. I carried it to the desk. There was no lock on the box itself, just a latch. I opened it. Inside was a folder. I opened the folder. The first document was a draft of a codicil. An amendment to his will. It wasn't signed, but the intent was clear. I hereby direct that the property at Marrow Lane be placed into the Briar Glen Heritage Trust immediately upon my death. He had tried to do it himself. Under the codicil was a list of phone numbers: Lydia, Mara, Alice, and one I didn't recognize: State Attorney General, Consumer Fraud Division. He had been building a case. He hadn't just been a victim, he had been a whistleblower, and at the bottom of the box was a single receipt: Briar Glen Community Bank, Safety Deposit Box Rental, Box number 442. Date: August 1st, 2025. He had rented a safety deposit box a month before he died. I looked in the box for the key, the flat, silver key that always comes with a safety deposit box. The box was empty. I shook it. Nothing. I felt a cold prickle on my neck. Dad wouldn't have lost the key. He was hiding this box. He would have put the key inside it. I ran upstairs. "Evan," I shouted. He came out of his room, bleary-eyed. "What? What is it?" I held up the receipt. "Did you take a key from a metal box in the den vent?" He looked at me like I was speaking Greek. "What box? There is a box in the vent?" His confusion was genuine. I could see it. He didn't know about the box. I went back downstairs. I stood in the den. The lock on the desk drawer had been scratched. The papers had been shuffled. Someone had been here. They had found the box. They had opened it. They had seen the receipt. And they had taken the key. They didn't take the papers because they wanted us to find them. They wanted us to know that they had the access. Or maybe they just took the key because whatever was in that safety deposit box was the real danger. I looked at the empty metal box. We weren't just fighting a legal battle. We were in a race, and the people we were racing against had a set of keys to our house. I shivered. The house felt violated again. Deeper this time. I walked to the front door and checked the lock. It was engaged, but locks didn't matter when the enemy had a copy of the key. I went back to the kitchen and sat in the dark, clutching the receipt. Tomorrow, at the hearing, we would fight for the right to manage the estate. But somewhere in Briar Glen, in a bank vault I couldn't open, sat the truth about my father's final days, and someone else held the key. The fluorescent lights of the Briar Glen County Courthouse hummed with a sound that burrowed straight into my skull. It was a low, electrical buzz, the sound of bureaucracy grinding people down. I sat at the defendant's table next to Lydia Harlan. My hands were clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. Across the aisle sat the attorney for Morrowland Finance. His name was Mr. Sterling, and he looked exactly like his name, polished, cold, and expensive. He wore a suit that cost more than my first car, and he had spent the last 20 minutes painting a picture of me that was unrecognizable. "Your Honor," Sterling said, smoothing his tie, "Ms. Coleman is a non-resident. She lives in Maryland. She has swept into town at the 11th hour, disrupting a necessary liquidation of assets to cover valid debts incurred by the estate. She is being obstructive. She is letting sentimental attachment override economic reality. The house is a wasting asset. Every day it sits empty. It loses value." He turned to look at me. His eyes were flat. "We simply ask that the court allow the sale to North Pine Property Solutions to proceed. It is a cash offer. It satisfies the lien. It makes the estate whole." The judge, a weary-looking woman named Judge Galloway, peered over her reading glasses. She looked at Lydia. "Ms. Harlan? The plaintiff makes a compelling argument for preservation of value. Why should I delay this?" Lydia stood up. She didn't look polished. She looked like a woman who had been fighting in the trenches of estate law for 40 years. "Your Honor," Lydia said, her voice gravelly but steady, "we are not obstructing for sentiment. We are obstructing because the debt itself is fruit of a poisoned tree." She gestured to me. Sarah stood up. I felt my knees shaking, but I forced my compliance officer persona to the surface. I wasn't a grieving daughter right now. I was an auditor. "Your Honor," I said, "I have prepared a timeline." I handed a folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "If you look at page 3, I continued, my voice gaining strength. you will see that the representative from North Pine, Dinah Kessler, initiated contact with my brother, Evan Coleman, on August 30th. That is 2 weeks before the lien was recorded. So? Sterling interrupted. That is just aggressive marketing. It is predation, I said, turning to face him. It suggests that the buyer and the lender are coordinated, and if you look at the notarization on the lien document itself, page 4, you will see it was stamped by Lakeshore Mobile Notary at 11 in the morning on September 14th. I took a breath. My father was checked into the Briar Glen Infusion Clinic from 9 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon on that day. He was hooked up to an IV. He was miles away from the house where the notary claims to have witnessed his signature. Judge Galloway flipped to the medical records I had attached. She frowned. Mr. Sterling, she said, can you explain how a mobile notary witnessed a signature in a sterile clinic without signing the visitor log? Sterling didn't blink. It is a clerical error. Your Honor, the date might be off by a day. The debt is still valid. The money was wired. The money was wired to a shell company. I said, not to a hospital, and the debt was immediately sold to a holding trust. This wasn't a loan. Your Honor, it was a manufactured default designed to force a transfer of the deed. Sterling sighed, loud enough for the back row to hear. This is a conspiracy theory, Your Honor. It is desperate flailing from a family that cannot pay its bills. Lydia stepped forward again. If the court pleases, she said, we have one more piece of evidence. It pertains to the property title itself. She pulled the map from her briefcase, the large, hand-drawn map that Mara Vance had given me. The paper was yellowed, the edges fraying. This is a sworn affidavit from Mr. Caleb Rourke, Lydia said. Along with a map signed by the decedent, Frank Coleman, it details a prescriptive easement and a right-of-way granted to Mr. Rourke's adjacent property 15 years ago. Sterling stiffened. An unrecorded easement is irrelevant. It is relevant if it establishes a boundary dispute. Lydia countered, if this easement is valid. The development potential of the land, which North Pine is clearly banking on, is severely compromised. The estate cannot sell the property with clear title until this claim is adjudicated. Judge Galloway looked at the map. She ran her finger over my father's signature. She looked up at Sterling. Mr. Sterling, there is a cloud on this title, and there is a significant question regarding the validity of the lien's notarization. But, Your Honor, Sterling started. The judge held up a hand. I am granting a temporary injunction, she said. No sale, transfer, or encumbrance of the property at Marrow Lane is permitted until a full evidentiary hearing can be held regarding the easement and the notary log. She banged her gavel. It wasn't a victory. It was a pause button. Thank you, Your Honor, Lydia said. We walked out of the courtroom into the hallway. My legs felt like jelly. I leaned against the cool plaster wall, trying to catch my breath. We had done it. We had bought time. Miss Coleman, I looked up. Dinah Kessler was standing near the water fountain. She looked perfect, as always. Not a hair out of place, but the warmth was gone from her eyes. They were cold, hard little stones. That was a cute trick, she said, dragging up an old mechanic to stall the deal. It is not a trick. I said, it is the truth. Dinah laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. The truth? Sarah, look at you. You look exhausted. You are burning through your savings. You are fighting a war you don't understand. I understand enough. I said, you understand nothing, she said, stepping closer. Her perfume was expensive and cloying. You think this is about a house? This is about capital allocation. This is about the future of Briar Glen. You are standing in front of a freight train holding up a stop sign. She lowered her voice. You will spend your whole life defending a building. Sarah. And in the end, we will get it anyway, because we have more time than you have money. Take the relocation package. Walk away while you still have a car to drive home in. I looked at her. I thought about Evan crying in the parking lot. I thought about my father dying alone in that house, trying to protect the water. It is not a building, I said quietly. Dinah raised an eyebrow. No? No. I said, it is evidence. I walked past her. my heels clicking on the marble floor. I didn't look back. I met Lydia in the parking lot. "We have the court order?" I asked. Lydia nodded, holding up a paper. Judge Galloway signed the order granting us access to the safety deposit box to inventory the estate assets. "Let's go," I said. The Briar Glen Community Bank was quiet. The branch manager, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, read the court order 3 times. He didn't want to do this. He knew who the power players were in town, and I wasn't one of them. But a court order was a court order. He led us into the vault. It was a room of steel and silence. "Box 442, he said, pointing to a small drawer in the wall. "Do you have the key?" "No," I said. "It was stolen. I didn't say who stole it. I didn't have to." "Mr. Henderson sighed. He called for the locksmith. It took 20 minutes for the locksmith to arrive. He was a young guy with a bag of heavy tools. He set up a drill against the lock of box 442. The sound of the drill was deafening in the small room. It shrieked as it bit into the metal. I watched the shavings of steel curl onto the floor. It felt violent. It felt like we were breaking into my father's soul. The lock popped with a metallic snap. The locksmith pulled the core out. "Mister?" Henderson slid the long metal drawer from the wall and set it on the table. I held my breath. I expected cash. I expected gold coins. I expected the desperate hoarding of a man who knew he was dying. The box was light. I opened the lid. There was no money. Inside lay a single, thick manila envelope and a small silver flash drive. The envelope was sealed with wax. On the front, in Dad's shaky script, it read, "To the Briar Glen Heritage Trust." I picked it up. My hands were trembling. "Open it," Lydia said softly. I broke the seal. I pulled out a document. It was a deed of gift. I, Frank Coleman, being of sound mind, hereby express my intent to convey the property at Marrow Lane to the Briar Glen Heritage Trust, to be held in perpetuity as a historic landmark and conservation site. He had done it. He had signed the intent. But there was a clause at the bottom, a condition. This gift is contingent upon the property being free of all liens and encumbrances at the time of transfer. I lowered the paper. He tried. I whispered. He wanted to give the house to the trust so Evan couldn't sell it. But the lien stopped him. He couldn't give away a debt-ridden asset. "So the document is useless?" Lydia asked. "Not useless," I said. "It proves his intent. It proves he didn't want to sell to North Pine. But it doesn't solve the money problem. Unless we pay off the $108,000, we cannot execute this deed." I looked at the flash drive. It was labeled with a piece of masking tape. "Marrow Lane. Read me first. We need a computer," I said. We drove to the house. The silence in the car was heavy. We had found the weapon, but we didn't have the ammunition. When we walked into the house, Evan was waiting in the kitchen. He looked better. He had shaved. He was wearing a clean shirt. "How did it go?" he asked. "We got the injunction," I said, and we opened the box. I put the flash drive on the table. Evan stared at it. "What is that?" "Answers," I said. I opened my laptop and plugged the drive in. A folder popped up on the screen. It was full of scanned PDFs and audio files. I clicked the first file. It was a scanned letter from the State Attorney General's office, dated 6 months ago. "Dear Mr. Coleman, thank you for your inquiry regarding the zoning irregularities in Briar Glen. We are opening a preliminary file." I clicked the next file. It was a timeline, much like the one I had made, but detailed with names I didn't know. Town council members, zoning commissioners. My father wasn't just a victim, I said, reading the screen. He was a whistleblower. He was feeding information to the state about Ridgewell's expansion tactics. I clicked on an audio file. It was a recording of a phone call. Dad must have learned how to record calls on his cell phone. I pressed play. Dad's voice filled the kitchen, raspy and weak. "Look, I don't care what you offer. The land isn't for sale." Then another voice, smooth, dangerous. "Frank, be reasonable. You are sick. Your son is unstable. We can make sure he is taken care of, or we can let nature take its course. I looked at Evan. He was white as a sheet. "That is Dina," he whispered. "That is her voice. She threatened him." I said, "She threatened to use you against him, and he recorded it. This is why they wanted the house so bad," Lydia said, leaning over my shoulder. "It wasn't just the land. They knew he was collecting evidence. They wanted to bury this drive. But they didn't know where it was." I said, "They found the receipt for the box, but they couldn't open the box without a court order." I looked at Evan. "We have proof of coercion." I said, "We have proof of predatory intent. But Evan, for this to work, for this to really stick—" "I know," Evan said. He stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the backyard, at the overgrown grass and the tree lined where the creek ran. "I have to testify." He said, "Yes," I said, "I have to tell the court about the gambling." He continued, "I have to tell them about the Red Alder Lodge. I have to admit that I signed the papers knowing they were fraudulent. If you do that," Lydia said gently, "you could face charges, fraud, conspiracy." "I know," Evan said. He turned to face us. He didn't look like the scared kid in the parking lot anymore. He looked like our father. "I spent my whole life trying to be the hero," Evan said, "trying to win the big jackpot to fix everything. But the house doesn't need a hero. Sarah, it needs the truth." He looked at me. "I will do it," he said. "I will tell them everything. I will blow the whole thing up. If I go to jail, I go to jail. But they are not getting Dad's house." I stood up and hugged him. It was the first time I had hugged him for real since I came home. He felt solid. He wasn't shaking. We were winning. I could feel it. We had the map. We had the drive. We had Evan's testimony. Then my phone rang. It was Jonah. "Sarah," he said. His voice was tight. "Hey, Jonah?" I said, feeling a smile tug at my lips. "We found it. We found the evidence. Don't celebrate yet," he said. "What is wrong?" "I just got a notification from the county clerk," Jonah said. "The assignment of the lien. It just updated." "Updated how?" "Morrowland Finance doesn't own the debt anymore," Jonah said. "They sold it an hour ago." "Sold it to who?" "Crown Meridian Holdings," Jonah said. "The parent company. And Sarah, they didn't just buy the lien, they bought the tax certificates for the last 3 years. "What does that mean?" I asked, my blood running cold. "It means they aren't looking to foreclose on the mortgage anymore," Jonah said. "They are moving for a tax deed sale. It bypasses the probate court. It bypasses the easement dispute. It is a nuclear option." "But we have the injunction," I cried. "The injunction is against Morrowland," Jonah said. "Crown Meridian is a separate entity. They will argue they are a third-party purchaser in good faith. They have deeper pockets than God. Sarah, they can outweight us for 10 years. I lowered the phone. The system. It wasn't one villain. It wasn't just Dina or the men at the lodge. It was a machine, a hydra. You cut off one head, and a bigger, richer head grew back. "What is it?" Evan asked. "They sold the debt," I said quietly. "To the holding company. They are shifting tactics. They are going to try to take it through taxes." Lydia sat down heavily in a kitchen chair. "That changes the venue. That moves us to tax court. That requires a bond." "How much?" I asked. "To fight a tax sale?" Lydia rubbed her temples. "You have to post the full amount of the back taxes plus interest just to get a hearing." "We don't have it," Evan said. I looked at the flash drive. I looked at the map. "We have the truth," I said, "but they have the gold." The sun went down, casting long shadows across the living room floor. The house was silent again. The adrenaline of the discovery had faded, replaced by a cold, hard reality. We were right, but being right might not be enough. I stood in the living room, looking at the wall where the deed used to hang. The ghost outline was still there, a pale rectangle in the darkness. Evan walked in. He stood beside me. "We can't save it. Can we?" he asked softly. "I don't know," I said. "I honestly don't know. We can fight. We can expose them. We can drag Dina's name through the mud and get the Attorney General involved. But the house, the physical structure, they might take it. Evan said, "They might." I admitted. I reached out and touched the wall. The plaster was cold. I thought coming back here was about saving the past. I said, "I thought if I could just organize the paperwork and pay the bills, I could bring Dad back. I could make us a family again." Evan looked at me. "We are a family." "Sarah." I looked at him. He was facing prison. He was facing ruin. But he was standing tall. "You were right," I said. "We can't save the past. The past is a ghost on the wall." I took his hand. "But we can decide what kind of people we are going to be now," I said. "We can be the people who sign the quiet deal and walk away with a check, or we can be the people who stand in the way of the machine. Even if we get crushed." Evan squeezed my hand. "Let's be the people Dad wanted us to be," he said. I nodded. Tomorrow, we would go back to Lydia. We would call the Attorney General. We would upload the files from the flash drive to every newspaper in the state. We would make so much noise that Crown Meridian couldn't hide in the shadows. They might get the wood and the stone. They might get the land. But they would never get the silence they paid for. I turned off the light. The room plunged into darkness. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. I knew what was in it. And I knew I wasn't facing it alone. Thank you for listening to this story. We have walked a long road with Sarah and Evan, from the shock of the funeral to the steps of the courthouse. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark side of inheritance and the fight for truth, please take a moment to comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you want to hear more dramas about family secrets, legal battles, and the quest for justice, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Sarah and Evan can beat the machine? Or is the system too strong? I can't wait to read your theories. Until next time, keep digging for the truth.